Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in X for Way of X, #1, presented by Crushing Comics. I am here with my X-Men fans from around the globe from me, Tyler, Fariha, and Harry, and we have gathered to talk about Way of X #1. It was out on the 21st of April, 2021, and this comes with a substantial warning. This comic touches on the themes of everything from Jonathan Hickman's Age of Krakoa so far. So if there's an X-Men book you haven't read yet, chances are we might spoil it in this conversation. But also necessarily, we're going to have to talk about other things happening in the Marvel Universe and in the past of the X-Men as well. And in this discussion, I'm almost certainly going to mention at least one recent DC Comics thing as well. So this is a spoiler-filled discussion, and you have been warned. Way of X #1 has so much, just so much to dig into. It's a double-length issue, but even if it hadn't been, there's just so much thematically. So I'm asking for first reactions without getting too far into the thematic stuff. Just what was your reaction to the issue as a whole? How did it make you feel? And without getting too deeply into what it made you think. Starting with Tyler.
This issue works on many levels. But, you know, the first and foremost, it is actually a follow-up to X-Men #7. And it also answers the question of one of our missing Omega Reality Warper mutant, which I believe is important to the Krakoan endgame. I mean, it crosses over into many, I mean, it touches on a lot of themes that is present in a lot of titles during this era, like New Mutants and perhaps X Factor, and also a small Easter egg to Sword. The most notable thing about Queen's art, which I'm not familiar with, is the expressiveness. I laugh out loud so many times during this issue because of all the so that was really funny. The only thing that sort of didn't quite work for me is the colors, which seems a bit muted to me. So I have to dock some points off for that. Overall, 4.8 psychedelic mushrooms out of 5.
Harry.
This is one of the best single issues I've read in a long time. I can't even begin to talk about how much I love this issue. It is incredibly rich and dense while also being so freaking funny, but also incredibly creepy. And it takes those two disparate feelings and melds them in such a clean, efficient way. And it's also an excellent book about Nightcrawler and gets into just so many themes of doubts and belief in such an interesting way. And it's kind of, this is the book that is looking at all of these weird things, and it's finally putting a direct focus on them with a really interesting narrative. And I think I've read this book like 5 times since it came out. I really like it. I'm going to give it just a straight 5 nice, happy feelings out of 5.
All right. Fariha.
So I hated it because there's no 100 issues of it already in front of me. Like I said that before, that, you know, I was hyperventilating for Sword. This one, I'm sorry for the mental image, everyone. I rubbed one out because this is mutants. This is like competency. This is everything that I have been asking for and I've been wanting. And oh my God, like it's like I can't eat my iPad because that's weird. If I had the physical issue, I would have eaten it by now. But oh my God, like I can't even. It's like 1,000 points out of 5. I don't know. I mean, oh, so good. So good.
Well, Fariha definitely followed the instructions of telling us how it made her feel. Which is genuine. Look, I mean, I have so much to say about this that I'm not sure we're even going to fit into the episode. If I distill it down to the smallest point, it's saying something that needs to be said in this Krakoan age. It fits in a way that is unique to this title, and it's a way that there was a thirst for, both within the books and for us as readers. And that's all you ever hope for any #1 comic book launching in any publisher from any line, is that it has something unique to say, and it almost fills a hole that either you knew that was there or you didn't even realize that was there. And I think that this filled filled both, right? It filled some things that we've needed, and it fulfilled some things that I didn't even know that I wanted. And to me, that's good comics. There's a point that a comic can make me feel so good, so energized, so page turning, but not wanting to turn the page because there's more to absorb. That to me, that's a perfect 5. I have a couple of the faces I didn't love. I have a couple color moments I didn't love. But when a comic is that good, and not just the writing, but Cy Spurrier, Bob Quinn, Yava Tartaglia, and Clayton Cowles, especially the lettering is what makes this work in a lot of cases, all coming together, that to me is perfection. So this is one of those true 5 out of 5s for me in the Age of Krakoa. And there ain't a lot of them, but this is one without a doubt in my mind. So this issue has so much, and I'm just going to try to take a path through it that I can figure out. But before I do, I want to just say that we don't have Zach, our friend Zach Rabaroff, on the panel right now. And Zach is kind of our go-to for Zach's mythological / religious / philosophical corner. And so while we all can contend with that content, we don't have who is generally our true expert. And if you're looking for some content to increase or deepen your read on that, on ComicsXF, Jude Jones and Anna Peppard wrote a tremendously great article about Way of X. I really try not to read other people's reactions to issues first, but it's essential, and I really recommend it to you. ComicsXF does so much great coverage every week, and this one has my personal endorsement. And then also our friend Robert Secundus, who is that on Twitter, exactly as I said it, did a tremendous thread digging into some of the theological concerns around this comic. I RT'd it on Crushing Comics, so you can go and take a look at that as well. And certainly as I speak to some of the theological concepts, I am drawing much from what I've learned and observed from them over the course of the few days of discussion of this as well. So I just feel the need to put that caveat out there by way of my introduction. So Kurt is writing something. Is it the X-Men Bible? Is it the Learner's Manual to Krakoa? He doesn't really know yet, but he's titled it the Florilegium. Florilegium in medieval Latin is a compilation of excerpts from other writings, but it also has to do with, if you're reading it literally, defining it literally, the gathering of flowers or collecting the extracts from a larger body of work. So there's already double entendre there. And he says this thing in his, chapter 1, verse 1, titled Preambles and Brain Farts. In the beginning, Krakoa offered mutant kind a dream of wonder and immortality. I saw only its flaws. I know now that my anxieties arose from obsolete modes of thought rooted in the outside world. Yet in their clumsy way, these anxieties led me to the trailhead I sought. And so the Way of X here is quite literal. It's Nightcrawler finding his way through Krakoa, and in some ways, leading us as readers. I mean, in the beginning, Krakoa offered mutant kind this thing, and I only saw flaws. This could be a lot of people on Twitter talking about X-Men books. It could be me talking about X-Men books.
I mean, oh my God. It's like, no,
it's also.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, I am raised Catholic, and it's like a very Catholic perspective of seeing the flaws in yourself and within institutions and trying to find some virtue in that. It very much felt right just from the get-go.
And, not for nothing, for those of us who had Bible verses drilled into our heads, it very much mirrors the structure of, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, not to get super, super literal rather, in our, biblical description here. But the next line there is, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. It's about just because you've created the heavens and the earth, it doesn't mean that it is anything yet, which is an interesting contrast to Kurt saying he saw only the flaws and this dream of wonder and immortality, because just because somebody made Krakoan culture doesn't mean that Krakoan culture is a thing that exists, that's perfected, that's evolved, that makes sense, that is moral. So that's where I want to actually start the discussion. Sorry, long preamble, but this issue, if anything, needs it. Because this book is very much about Kurt's doubts, and that's where I want to start. Yeah. Kurt has a lot of doubts. I could enumerate them, but maybe it'd be more fun to have you talk about your favorite doubt that Kurt has about Krakoan society, and we'll go from there. So, Fariha, what is your favorite, or the one you identify the most with the things that Kurt's just not so sure about here is working well on Krakoa?
So before we get that though, I do want to talk about that first page, because that, like, when I was looking at that, I'm like, my God, this is all the people who I wanted to actually beat up, on talking about Krakoan agents. It was such a an awful feeling knowing some of the people is who are talking about mutants don't die anymore and stuff like that. And I'm like, did you not read rest of the any X-Men, and now I have gone and read them, and I'm like, oh my god, these are awful, and this is like such a fun a thing. But even then, I was like the most proponent of that. There are so many things that's wrong with this. There's so many things that's wrong with it, and all of that is brought up over here. The one and you're talking about among all his doubts, the one that is just the fact that how mutants can get their power back. It's a horrible thing that they have set up, the Crucible. There's nothing fun about it. There's like a cult vibe feelings about it, and they're all like, and there's like this one scene where it's like when he says at the very end, it's like, oh, I'm not worried about that, I'm worried about them, which is shot for shot something that Tyler and I talked about a different issue in our current world as well. And it just kind of brings it all together. And I was like, yes, talk about these things. I don't give a about what humans think about mutants anymore. I want to talk about this. This is it. And
Harry, what for you of Kurt's potential problems with Krakoan culture? Which one stuck out the most for you?
Well, obviously, the Crucible is the biggest one, but that almost felt like a parody or taking the piss out of Jonathan Hickman's comic, where it's just like such a brutal, more vicious interpretation of this tradition, which I find it more interesting because it's you're seeing this thing from so many different perspectives, and Nightcrawlers is just so grim of it, which I find interesting. But for me, the one that had the most impact was in the beginning. It's just it's the kids just entirely just shedding any issues or fears of death. It's just become like a fun ritual or like a sex stand-in, where it's like he doesn't know why this is wrong, but on some deep feeling, he knows there's something, he's unsettled by it. And just watching the culture just rapidly shift in front of his eyes and just not being able to articulate why that's weird. I mean, I feel like that's like a very interesting religious perspective, and I think it's like an interesting tone to have for him, and it's a good one to start off the book, because this whole book is about being unsure about things and not figuring out what the right level is. So it's just a great way to start this thing.
Tyler, of all Kurt's concerns, what sticks out the most for you?
I mean, I kind of have to start from the first page as well, which is I just want to mention something sort of to set the scene of where I'm coming from. I'm not a Christian. I have not read the Bible, even though I know certain things in Christianity. So certain things kind of hit me a little bit more on the head. I was like, oh, okay, that I mean, the very obvious one would be the mention of Eden and snakes. That kind of like, it's obvious what it's talking about. But what really struck me as, I mean, should I say that it's clever, or or maybe is universal in a way, is that being a Buddhist, I can see certain themes here that works within Buddhism as well. And the very first thing that struck me that works here is that the two lines, especially the second one, is like, Kurt says, I hoped to learn what we ought to believe, but I learned instead how we ought to live, which is really very Buddhist, because at its core, Buddhism, for lay followers, not talking about monks, is really a guide to how we live our life and to not go for extremes. So, there's always this thing about the middle path. And here we do see extremes. And I thought like, is really interesting. And I mean, the first thing I think that struck me as Nightcrawler's, not so much his doubt, but I thought was really funny and really interesting, is that his pushback against Xavier and his establishing, he trying to establish himself, well, maybe not establish, but he basically reacting to Xavier more as equal now and not really one of Xavier's followers, and which is actually very interesting and really which is kind of, I think, a failure of Xavier's part, because he specifically chose 3 people to put on the council because he thinks that they will vote for him. One has resigned. Kurt is obviously not going to vote with him because he's his own person. And Storm, you can bet my life that she is voting. She's a voting block within the three ladies in Hellfire, and not with Xavier anymore. So his three people that he put on the Square Council here is like gone.
But isn't that a success for Xavier though? That he taught them well, that they can be their own people?
From the perspective of we thinking that that's what Xavier wants.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
What he want,
but I don't think
question.
Xavier wants that. I think Xavier, in this instance, he really wants them to basically just listen to him.
Even after all this death.
Yeah.
Xavier, man.
I don't know. I mean, that's my view in the sense.
Shut
but
man.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to jump a little bit into the story in a moment, but I want to give my reactions to that too. The thing that Nightcrawler said that really stuck out in my catalog of this issue of all my many notes is laughter may be the antidote to horror. And that says a lot about who Nightcrawler is and has always been, right? Like he laughs in the face of death quite literally, no matter what is facing the mutants, because he decides early on in Claremont, and we've experienced this in our read, that there's no use being angry all the time. That's not a space that contributes anything when he holds it. And we've seen him return to that anger. It's not that he's never been angry again, but Nightcrawler understands that the best thing that he does is laugh in the face of horror, laugh in the face of death. But then what happens when there's no defined horror? And that's really what he's contending with, I think, in this Krakoan society. There's no moral flaw, he says, but there's something terrible just out of sight. And part of what he's articulating that is that death now is cheap death. It's free, actually. It's free death. It's consequenceless death. So if he has built his whole personality, but also part of his belief, and find some joy in this mortal coil in the face of oppressive horror. And now you've not only removed horror, but removed death. Then have you also removed joy? And I think that that's a lot of what Nightcrawler is like wrestling with him here, because he's witnessing this younger generation and their conception of joy, which is now very tied up with what Krakoan culture is for them, right? A lack of death, a don't be such a Wanda, don't be so sapiens. Their definition of joy now is evolving based on this new thing, and Nightcrawler doesn't know how to access joy anymore. And that's a really scary thing for Nightcrawler, just as scary as any big theological gap, because Nightcrawler identifies as this joyous person. He tries to play a joke on Magneto, and now we'll start to get into the plot a little bit, and it just falls flat because Magneto turns it into an opportunity to sermonize. But before we get to that, we have to set up the joke. So Fariha, what do you have to add there? And then and then we can set that up a little bit.
No, because when you said that, the laughter is in the face of horror and death, but isn't that after being a circus person? It comes from that, like, because that's what circus is. Like, it's people are laughing while someone is about to, like,
plunge to their death.
Death,
it's the whole
plunge to their death. And and then also like the fact that he has always been a religious person, but he also died, went to heaven, now he can't go back, like, that he has all of that baggage with him. So he's like, I can't even look forward to that. What do I have left? Well,
and also laughing in the face of horror then is also about Kurt holding up a mirror to himself. Like he has a horrific visage. He's part demon until that gets retconned. And so part of being in the circus was people laughing at his horror and him being okay with that, saying, laugh at me, that's fine. And so there's many, many layers to that. And that's why it stuck out the most. So this starts with an actual mission that he actually does need to go on, which is infiltrating this Orchis hub of a school for anti-mutant missionaries as one of their oblique strategies. And he brings a lot of young X-Men along, and it goes well in some ways and not well in others. He does capture some information. They do kind of disrupt it. Pixie willingly dies because she hasn't had her first time yet of dying, and so she walks right into it. But also, it's interesting because this is clearly, you can read it as a riff on like religious fundamentalism, that they're infiltrating this fundamentalist conclave. But at the same time, they have this hall of horrors that mutants have absolutely committed, including ones from Apocalypse and notably Magneto, that have held the whole human race hostage. So it's like you can draw a line between them and evangelicists, but at the same time, like, they've got some real reasons to be afraid of mutants, which kind of underscores the amount of laughter that Nightcrawler brings to it. What did you think, Tyler, about this brief excursion against the Orchis Missionaries school?
I mean, it's is really interesting in the sense that it sets up the whole concept, I think, where I think New Mutants is trying to address right now, right? Because everyone, because of the lack of structure in Krakoa, I mean, the kids are doing whatever they want to do, right? They are like, basically, well, we can die now. So where's the thrill? The thrill is to.
I'm fully on Fariha's team of there needs to be a school. Like, these kids are out of control. We need to like put them in a playpen or something. They're just killing themselves now for the hell of it.
And it's like
killing herself to like make him feel something. Like, she puts herself into the refrigerator. She's like, oh, maybe if he kills me, he'll feel bad about killing people in the future. Not that it matters, because if you kill mutants, they're all going to come back, and just lets herself die. I mean, this is exactly what the Crucible, as brutal as it may be, is designed to circumvent, which is people just knowingly walking into death without there being consequence. Of course, Pixie, being on a mission, gets priority for being resurrected, but the Crucible exists so that people who won't have priority don't just go off and die.
Mm-hmm.
No, but the thing is, like, it's also kind of peer pressure about like first time.
Oh yeah,
I know. Even though they said like a first time, but it's what I mean. Like, there's like all that. There's the peer pressure, and she did it purely out of peer pressure than anything. Like, it was Bruno like, oh, I don't want to be like, maybe I want to feel how it is. But seriously, where is the school?
No,
where is it?
But even then, right? We have been talking about the Krakoan culture. But it's mostly about talk. Mm-hmm. Here is actually very different, because you see the slang of Krakoan kids.
Yeah, and it's real.
And that is culture. That is part of culture. And also the fact that Kurt is like, wait, hold on. I am kind of like the old person here. Like, I don't understand what is happening.
What's a yeet, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
what are they doing? And,
are you hashtagging?
Guys?
Yeah. And then I love that callback to Kurt's power, where he disappeared into shadows and only his eye shows. And then he scared DJ, and DJ said, so I thought that was funny. But I mean, that's why I think like this issue in and of itself works on so many different levels, and it's just good.
It's a rich
and then also
text.
those people who are like, oh, why should mutant go to a island, because that means racist one. Just look at that page where there's like a hall of horror. You don't want them as your neighbor. Like, maybe Beak, but rest.
Well, Beak's a good neighbor.
The other thing I kind of noticed as well is that in Xavier's chat, desk, he has like 3 pictures, right? Yeah. And 2 of them are of his kids, because one is the Xandras, and then the one that he's holding up is Gabriel and Legion, with the dad's face torn off, because Xavier learned of Legion only when he's a teenager, so he wasn't there in the picture. So he basically tore off the guy's face. Yeah. So who is the guy in the middle?
It's just him.
Himself?
No. Oh, you mean the middle picture? I don't know. Well, we're going to get into a lot more Xavier stuff, but I want to follow this Nightcrawler thread from the beginning of the issue just for a moment. So Nightcrawler does some amount of disruption on this Orchis Missionary School, and he comes back, but he has Blink, who's a long-distance teleporter, unlike himself, bring back one of these Hall of Horrors monuments, which is Magneto with some version, real or imagined, I'm not sure, of his missiles from X-Men 1963 #1. And he thinks it would be kind of a funny gag to, make light of this and show it to Magneto. Magneto kind of uses it as a moment to grandstand. And partially because he thinks that Nightcrawler has really missed the mark on turning it into something funny, and also that he's missed the mark to use it as an opportunity to sermonize, which Nightcrawler promised he was going to start thinking about. So, Fariha, what do you think here? Magneto has often been shown as kind of one of the centers of myth, one of the centers of belief on the Krakoan Isle. Do you think he's kind of in the right to call out Kurt a little bit here, or is he just being an old fuddy-duddy?
No, I think he definitely is, because he is the one who keeps on saying that I expect more from the mutants. That's his thing. Like, we see him say that in Excalibur, last issue of Excalibur. We seen him, like, even in Sword, like, and even here, that, I expected more from you. And I think in a way he's also saying I expect more from my boyfriend's student. So and the thing is, like, also, like, it kind of plays into the whole Germans are bad at jokes. So they're both Germans and they're bad at jokes, like,
in professional settings. Sometimes if you work with somebody who's from Germany and grew up in Germany, sometimes they are slightly more humorless, as I am actually in a professional setting. It's a thing in certain work cultures.
So I think, like, that's one of the reasons he was not, like, very, like he was disappointed by Nightcrawler. Like, it's like, I expect, like, I don't think he would have cared if it was Blink or one of those kids. He would just give them like a sermon, but the thing is the fact that it's him, like, it's like, that's where it is. And also there's like a costume change that's over here that is very significant from another costume change that we have talked about. Like, it's just like he went back to his better days, and then so that's one of the things that I think he was trying to do. Like, you are reminding me of my old days that I have grown from, but here you are still holding on to your old religion and all your thing, and you will keep on saying that you're going to do something and you haven't done something, and you're wasting your time doing that. I'm not sure whether this was here or a little bit later somewhere, because he also talks about his own faith, which is very interesting given his Jewish background, because it's because that's something that I've always kind of wondered, that if Way of X is going to explore that, because if the mutants are supposed to go for a new faith and everything, but then they all came from their own different human cultures and everything, but he's the one who was persecuted by humans because of his faith, and because that was like a whole other thing. So I mean, that's something that kind of jumped out at me as well. It's like, okay, so what does that mean? Did he kind of moved on from that as well?
Well,
this is where we needed Zach.
See, I had a different read. I think Magneto comes off easily the worst he's looked in all of these books. He is he's a giant dick in this issue, and I think a lot of that is tied into the data page from Nemesis, where it's basically suggesting that the resurrections are basically kind of leading towards this warrior culture through like prejudice resurrections and what have you. And he kind of says it the most, where he's like, in lack of traditions or kind of like ideas or cultures, the strongest figures will kind of assume control, and just cuts to Magneto. And Magneto, like, yes, it's the Crucible and she wants it to happen, but he kind of brutalizes this poor woman. He really beats her up and like stabs her, and like he just comes off super like just blunt tool, almost like savage in this. And I view that almost like from, this book is so centered on Nightcrawler's perspective that, but yeah, I think this is easily like I was kind of surprised that compared to another book we covered this week, where he kind of comes off more like nuanced and balanced, that he does not have a good look here to me. But
I think it's really interesting to think about the order, right? Like, does this happen first, and then he shows up in the purple and red in Sword because he kind of is reflecting upon this moment with Kurt, or does he have the purple and red on in Sword, and then Kurt confronts him with it, and he's like, I just gave my monologue about this in front of you in the council, but like you're not thinking about this critically enough. It kind of reads in an interesting way, no matter what order you assume they happen in, and so that's one of the fun parts about the interplay of these books. Because I do want to get us to the Crucible, I think first we have to talk about science, because as we're going to briefly skip over who Kurt runs into slightly before this conversation, because then he runs into Doctor Nemesis, who Fariha is recently acquainted with from reading Fraction and Gillen's run. And Spurrier at the time did write some Doctor Nemesis in X Club. And so he has handled this character before. And this scene just brings up so many questions. It implies that Doctor Nemesis, first of all, is growing hallucinogenic mushrooms out of his scalp. It also implies quite heavily that he is the one who engineered Xavier's launch of Krakoa's pharmaceutical arm, which is really interesting to think about, because we have not dug overly deeply into that so far. But he also wants to be the chief and, let it be known, sole research and development officer of Krakoa, except for law and ethics. Someone else can sub in for that. I actually have some experience with Dunbar's number, and so I don't want to just monopolize conversation. I'll send it around to everybody, starting with Fariha, since she seemed so eager to talk about Dr. Nemesis. We're not going to skip you, Tyler. Don't worry. I'm just trying to make sure that we're getting a little bit of everybody here. But then don't steal Dunbar's number from me, because that's what I'm going to talk about when it comes back around. Fariha, what did you think about this chief science officer moment with the psychedelic Dr. Nemesis?
So since I found out about Dr. Nemesis, I've been asking everyone, like, everywhere, even though I don't have social, like, do you know where Dr. Nemesis is? Do you know where Dr. Nemesis is? Is he coming back? Is he going to be anywhere? So the fact that he's here and then he's like in his full glory, oh, like, so good. It's so good. Bring the X Club back. But I just wanted to say that, some of the things that he is proposing, that he is going to be specialized studies, time shenanigans, which is very important for if you are a mutant, is very important. Mostly ethical pharma, which is important. Mostly ethical is important. Fertility and sexy time. I was like, tell me more about that. Let's have a bunch of issues about that. And then, genetic diversity program, which is scathing note to Sinister. I was just laughing. I laughed so much at this page. And then also the fact that he's like, everything is like director, Dr. Nemesis, because that's him. He thinks that everyone else just sucks and everyone else doesn't know anything. He is the king. And it just showed up so well. And then the fact that it was a mushroom head all this time, but not actually a hair, like a cap thing, it just blew my mind. Oh my god, it's just perfect. Everything.
No, I thought the mushroom head was new, right?
Yeah, it's new.
That's new.
No, it is new. No, I know. I thought that it was a hat. Like I thought it was like a fashion thing. It was like I was like, what is he doing? Because I saw like an image somewhere of that.
Some
like,
preview page.
Preview pages. I was like, what is that? But then I was like, oh no, mushroom. Hey, do you want some mushroom?
He's just.
I'm just growing that. Like, see what
I'm just a dealer.
Like,
in addition to all my science duties, you want to taste my mushroom?
Do you want to taste the mushroom? And he's also kind of showing off his power, his what he can do. Like this is he's saying that. And I was like, hey, if you give me the resurrection thing, look what I can do, young people. Do you want some mushroom?
Yeah,
I try them.
Yeah, it's like 80 years ago. I already modified myself so that I don't puke.
Right, because he's actually a golden age character that gets repurposed during
like
Fraction's run.
Yeah.
Harry, what did you think about science officer Nemesis here?
Well, the data page is just funny. Like that's kind of like the biggest thing is that this guy's just got the ego the size of the island itself. And then, I mean, it's the final line right at the bottom, like shut up, Sinister, you don't have a monopoly on this. Stick to your dreary eugenics, which is just a all-time line. But no, he's like the perfect supporting character for this because he's the one asking the big questions. He's got that like great spurrier voice. Like it feels like he's going to be one of the characters that kind of crystallizes all of the themes and all of the big ideas and presents them in such like a fun way. This is like an example of just Spurrier knocking it out of the park. Like I love this guy.
And then also that there's the whole thing about science and religion. Like, it doesn't have to be versus. It can be working together. And I think like there is a theme of that is developing over here.
I do love the running beat of like just like people being like, yeah, Kurt, I thought you were gonna start a mutant religion. It's like, yeah, I thought that I'd figure it out by now.
I should have said that. Like,
because that is like such a abstract idea. It's like, I don't really know what that is. I guess we'll figure it out.
Right. So in X-Men 7, he does actually, there is a charge that, that Krakoa created for him, and he goes in there, and that's where he got the idea. And then since then, everyone's just like, so are you going to do this?
Yeah.
I feel that's almost a commentary on the writers. Just like, I don't know what a mutant religion means. Okay. I don't know. But it's fun.
All right, Tyler.
Oh, no, I was just going to add like that I'm surprised he did not forge. Because there is experimental murder tag in one of the specialist studies. And it's like, and that is like such a low-hanging fruit because what did they call Forge is in the Skunk Works, like in the original chart. Yeah, so it's like it's easy, so easy for him to like this Forge here. But he is also the one who pointed out to Kurt, he challenged him on his beliefs. Right, because it's like, well, you have fought with and against gods, and yet you believe the one that you cannot see. Why?
It's a great line.
Yeah, which is an interesting implication since Nightcrawler has literally, as Fariha pointed out earlier, been to the Christian
To
heaven.
Yeah.
Into heaven with
Yeah.
his buddy, Professor X.
Yeah.
And pirates.
Seriously,
That's
that guy is like,
Is-
All right.
I need
And
to
then-
introduce Professor X to Lucifer from DC Universe, and then he will know. Like,
Have
that's
fun, guys.
not gonna work.
And that sort of like ties in like neatly to the scene cut where it goes to the idea of like shared ideas to unify society, or let the strongest invent rituals. And in some ways Magneto did say he's God in House of X 1.
You have
Yeah.
new gods.
All right.
Yeah.
So
They
now
all are.
let's
This is the
talk a
biggest
little.
part of the issue. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Dunbar's number, but it's going to take us
Yes.
into that because I think Nemesis's data page. I think if for some reason you happen to be watching this and you're somebody who hasn't been following X-Men, you felt sort of like, I don't know if I dig this, or if you have one of those people in your life that's like, I don't know, they can't die, I'm not sure. Literally just screenshot Nemesis's data page and send it to that person because it shows that there is a self-awareness about this. I feel like a lot of people are like scared that the books are not going to address these issues inside the narrative. They absolutely are. They just haven't had the right book to do it. And I think the data pages here come off scathingly. Nightcrawlers and Nemesises, they almost read like fans criticizing X-Men from the internet.
It's
like they're
it's almost like a
scathing.
yeah, like a satire of this whole run. Just
No,
like
this
you
is-
thought this was nice.
but by
This
way
is
of that,
Fariha's speech. This is
Yeah.
basically Fariha's speech to the
This-
people who said that.
Right. This is
Wild.
what I have said. This is my speech.
well, but it cuts both ways because it's a speech to them and kind of to the X-Men too. And in that, I want to talk about Dunbar's number. They explain it very well in the issue. It doesn't need a whole lot of other explaining, but it's this idea that there's a finite number of complex interactions you can have with people. You might be able to remember other people's names, but it's a polite myth to say that you can have societal bonds with more than, and it's sometimes it's 120, sometimes it's 150, but past that, you don't have a societal bond with that person. And this came up for me in my first experience working in a tech startup. I was person number 23 at that startup. And at a point we had about 150 people. And our CEO was a big believer in this Dunbar's number. And he was like, as we get bigger and bigger, I want to try to do things that help us enforce the bonds with each other. So he'd always try to have us go out for lunch with people that are not in our department. He had a video game that we would sometimes play that had people's faces to see how quickly we could like type their name in department. He tried to do anything he could, but he was fighting against something that's ultimately you can't fight against, which is at a point, there's going to be that 151st person you're not going to have a relationship with. Maybe people can handle some more people, maybe some people can handle less, but that's the way a burgeoning society works. So when House of X and Powers of X happened, this society, it was formed around a core of the Quiet Council and probably, let's say, anybody who had actively been an X-Men. That was probably less than 150. It was probably less than 120. It was really easy to have 3 general laws spoken by your friends or acquaintances in the Quiet Council that everybody understood and would interpret in a similar way. Right. It's like saying at the startup when there's only 24 people, just don't leave your dish in the sink, right? It's really, really easy to not when you're 24 people. But then when there's 150 people, you have to have a security camera in the kitchen to figure out who keeps leaving their dishes in the sink because not everybody has a societal bond to anybody else. And that's Nemesis's whole point here is you didn't think what would happen when this society went from a small collection of people with direct bonds to each other to an actual community. Science already has ideas about this, but you haven't gone in to put any belief into place. Belief actually works better than laws because people share belief. And the thing that happens when you don't put belief into place is people start believing things on their own. They make their own culture. The kitchen adopts its own laws regardless of who's supposed to leave things in the sink or not. And this exactly describes the Krakoan problem. And as Nemesis describes in his data page, it describes, as everybody I think at this point has hinted at, that the strongest people, the loudest voices, are the ones that begin to define the rules when you don't have any rules. So Dunbar's number, it's a thing in real life. You can see it all the time in internet communities, and Discord's gone wild after they are actually quite kind at the beginning because people stop having interactions with each other. So this kind of, I think this scene burst it wider open. I think Kurt had his doubts to begin with, but Nemesis is like, your doubts are real, but they're not just theological doubts. They're not just moral doubts. Don't just look for the moral flaw. You can explain this in a scientific way as well. Peter's Dunbar's number corner is now over. I open the floor to reactions to that and also to take us into our discussion of the Crucible as one of these things that has sprung up from the loudest, most powerful voice in the room, Apocalypse, who's not even in the room anymore.
It's like the most, I think it's like the most important data page in like literally all of these books, because this is the one, because the thing about the Crucible in that Hickman comic was like it, like a lot of the things that Hickman was introducing is that it's like intentionally ambiguous. You can see this as a beautiful thing, you can see this as something possibly sinister. This is the book that's saying no, we're going to focus on everything sinister about all of this, and this data page is basically suggesting, just through what you're saying, just through like just course of events, like this is becoming, like this can become a somewhat barbaric culture that focuses exclusively on warriors and rewards that kind of mentality. And what does that look like? And I think the book's positing not great as it stands, which is super interesting. I'm kind of shocked how much, at least my read, this book kind of like made Krakoa look kind of bad, which was super interesting though.
So, as the ambassador for Krakoa, I'm going to propose a different interpretation of this.
Ooh.
This is exactly what I was screaming about all this time, because mutants becoming this is actually doesn't solve any of their problem, but this like accelerates all of their other problems that didn't have all this time to think about. They couldn't think about it. And the thing is, the fact that you were saying that this is a nation of warriors and stuff, mutants are warriors. That's what they have been all this time. They cannot shake that, no matter how much
the idea of this island, they don't have to be.
But the
like,
thing, they can't get over it because the council is filled with older people, older mutants.
And they're filled with people who've had to be warriors. There's nobody on that council that hasn't, other than, well, Doug died a warrior. Everybody on the council has been a warrior.
Yeah, they're all warriors. That's all they have seen is the fight, and fight. The thing is, Crucible, in a way, like, it started off, it is an apocalypse idea. It's
the most apocalypse idea ever.
It's the most apocalypse, like his bad interpretation of Darwin theory, it's personified over there. And I was so happy to see that, because that shows two different things. It's like, you can be here, you can hang around, but you're not going to have your power. We can let you die because that makes us look bad. So if you want your power back, honey, come over here. We'll get your power back, but you have to show us that you want. It also shows that mutant is just not about power. It's you can be mutant, but your power doesn't make you mutant. But the thing is, in issue 7, when the Crucible was first introduced, it was Melody Guthrie. Mm-hmm. Her whole family was there to help her. Her whole family was there to raise her up, take her there. And then, they had the fight. And then, it was such a good thing. This time around,
it wasn't even just her blood family. Her found family was there.
Her found family was there too.
Yeah.
And then the way that Apocalypse Apocalypse made it tender. Like, for Apocalypse, he made it like so, like, it's like, it's okay, he was making it like warrior, he was making it you're doing something so noble. And then that's what happened when that person is gone. When you leave this ridiculous idea out there, someone else is gonna fall in there, and they're not gonna be kind. They're not going to, because the follow-up person, Magneto, he's the master warrior. He's the warrior of the mutants. Like, he's not going to be kind, because he's going to treat you like, like, hey, whatever. Like,
stabs this woman like 100 times.
And then this woman doesn't have a family. She doesn't have a found family. She was there all by herself, and later they felt like, she was in pain the whole time, so she was fighting with pain. They didn't ask her, they didn't do anything, so everything just fell apart.
Right.
The other thing about the other thing about the Dunbar theory I was talking about is like, see how Exodus lost control of the children. Like, see issue 7, how he had them captivated. They were like listening to every word. Now they're like, wait, the patchwork brand? Yo, man, did you hashtag that? It's like, it's like, hey, wait,
patchwork man will queue up.
What is patchwork man? It's like, what the hell is that? It's like, no, let's just reel it in. So it's like,
hold on. We are talking about one thing.
We're talking about one thing, and it's like, but the thing is, it's Exodus. It's Bennett Duperez who lost control, who lost control of the little bit of mutants. I mean, everything about there is just such perfection about how this society is failing, and I love it. I'm like, mwah! Like, give me more, because this is what mutants should be fighting, not trashy humans.
Tyler?
I mean, there's not a lot I could add to this part of the conversation. You guys did cover a lot of grounds, and I think there's only one point that I kind of want to make here, is that the strength that is being referred here probably does not just refer to strength in power, but also strength in personality, because
for sure,
really strong. Yeah, because a really strong personality could take over a group and influence it, in many ways, as opposed to someone who has power. So,
well, I want to tie that all together with one thing and then move us forward. Something I didn't mention in that Dunbar's number is that Nemesis quite wisely says society's bigger than this number requires abstractions. And an abstraction can be anything. An abstraction can be a belief. It can be a religious law. It can be a codified law in your society. But that's an abstraction of what behavior ought to be, right? To find some penal code about like what we should and shouldn't do, in our lives. That's just an abstraction of somebody else introducing their idea of morality because they can't come and share that with us specifically. And that's the whole point of this, is that everybody's going to create their own abstractions unless some central body kind of comes in and does it. So we get this Crucible scene, which I think we've covered pretty well now. But here's the thing that I think Fariha started to tease out that comes to pass here, is that because nobody asked this woman what was wrong or why she was in pain or who she was, basically now there's just a sign-up sheet like at an open mic night. You get to the Crucible and you sign up and you're like, I'll take Magneto, and then Magneto brutalizes you and you die, and like nobody even asks like, how'd you get to Krakoa? What was your power anyway? Like we've already progressed past that. And this person wakes up and it turns out their power is actually quite harmful to other people. And so we get this really interesting scene of Kurt is there because he wants to be there for this person and also for Pixie. He's brought Pixie a cheese toastie, is what she was thinking about in her moment of death. But Pixie got resurrected from before she wanted a cheese toastie. We've lost this moment, and Nightcrawler goes back to talk about it in another one of his Florilegium pages. He talks about what journey does the soul undertake during resurrection? What happens to those offcuts of experience that fall between the moment a psyche is recorded and the moment of death? So on one hand, we're dealing with that for Pixie, one of the chosen few who, everybody's there to welcome her. Meanwhile, there's this other person who died and has no control over her powers, and nobody even thought to prepare for that. So it's like a really interesting haves and haves not moment that even Xavier and Magneto are sickened by this woman's powers, which deal with the delocalization of gravity, such that her body has grown without of the bounds of gravity. And Nightcrawler's one of the only ones who doesn't get sick because he's used to bopping around in every direction.
It's funny.
When he bamfs. And Nemesis, who's just on drugs. So Tyler, what did you think about this moment contrasting Pixie's hero's welcome and this woman's nameless welcome?
I mean, that's the thing with this whole Krakoan era, right? We have seen scenes where that is meant to lead us to think in one way, but here we are saying, Spiro is basically saying, hey, hold on a minute. We have this in place, but have you thought about what would happen if it is someone unknown, if it is done this way, if it's done in a brutal way instead of a honorable way, a courageous way, that kind of thing. So there are all these questions that are being asked, and using Nightcrawler as the person asking this question, I think is actually really perfect.
Harry?
Yeah. No, I mean, I just think it's like another like interesting wrinkle. Just like her powers mess everyone up. But to Tyler's point, it's fascinating that Spurrier's taken this, so far somewhat positive ritual, what have you, and just shaded it so far into the night where it's just like you don't feel good, and even the scene caps it by having everyone vomit. It's like a very it just keeps you like off kilter. It's like things we have been used to, but just putting it in such like a more emotionally queasy way. I love that.
All right, so we have a few topics left to discuss, and I want to bridge us to one of them here.
Wait, before that, can I
Oh.
just like put
I
in
didn't
like
say anything about this.
Yeah.
thing.
I'm not going
Fariha
to
wants
every
to talk.
person every time because there's so much, Fariha. But if you have if you have things to share, please do share them.
Yeah. No, I just
Okay.
want to point out like two small like Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Jonathan, the Wolverine is
Where?
on Krakoa.
Where is he?
If you go back to one of the page where the kids are playing, Jonathan is there
he's
in the
hanging out.
field. Yeah. So
that's nice.
it
I'll
is
scroll.
the one where
Magneto is monologuing.
yeah. So right at the bottom, on page 17, I think. 17 of the art.
There he is. There
Okay,
he is.
and what was the
Jonathan
other
is there.
Easter egg?
So the other Easter egg is when Magneto compresses the missile, he compresses them into the Mysterium, the shape of a pyramid.
Oh,
I didn't notice that.
So he does.
took me a
So I
few
thought that
reads.
was it was really interesting.
I like the
So
elephant
sword,
man.
so sword came before this then.
Maybe.
Sure.
Maybe.
All right, Fariha, what
Yeah.
do you want to add to the Crucible and Resurrection, especially Resurrection discussion?
So the resurrection in discussion, one thing I want to say that X-Men always, like, there's like a whole thing about what is an X-Men and what is a mutant and how this should be separated. X-Men always said that how they're the face of the people and, how they're the ones who are going to help people or whatever the nonsense that they spew all the time. And then Kurt was an X-Men and then, but the thing is when the woman came to him, he was like, go to the welcome center. That's over there. He did not take the time to listen to her thing. And that led to all the things happened. Because later on she's like, I wanted to choose you because they said that you were the kindly ones, that you're the kindest or something like that. Kindly ones.
Well,
That's
Fariha has
really
brought us to one of our
Sandman.
penultimate topics here, which is the kindly ones. And it's layered because the kindly ones, it doesn't originate in Sandman. It originates in Euripides because it was a euphemistic reference to the Furies in Greek mythology. Now, that is also how Sandman uses it. But before we can even dig into the three people who call Nightcrawler one of the kindly ones here, we have to realize that Spurrier is hot off of writing in the Sandman universe, Peter's favorite comic of 2020, Hellblazer, which was absolutely phenomenal.
It's good.
And
It's really good.
really absurdly good. And it had the same energy. Every issue was totally dissecting some aspect of modern British life, but looking at that through the lens of the DC universe and John Constantine existing in the DC universe. But it's absolutely a commentary on monarchy, on social programs, on all sorts of things told through the lens of horror, a familiar topic in this issue, and Constantine, contending with that horror and introducing sometimes horrors of his own. Could not recommend more highly. Here's Spurrier basically saying, what if I wrote that same book, but it was about Krakoa instead of Britain in terms of islands? And he also brings in the kindly ones, which any comic fan is immediately going to think of Sandman, even though it has a root in classical Greek myth. And three different people call him the kindly ones. Interesting, since it represents the Furies, of whom often are shown as three. Xavier calls him one of the kindly ones, and he frames it as, you understand people in a way I never could. This woman refers to Kurt as the kindly ones, and it seems like it's a more literal interpretation, like you seem kind. And then a third person who's at the climax of this issue, which I'm really not ready yet to dig into, you got to just hold it on to it, people, also calls Kurt a kindly one, but maybe in a slightly different way. So I'm going to hand it to my Sandman expert here, Fariha, just to briefly talk about Kurt as a kindly one, and if that tracks at all to the way that we talk about kindly ones in Sandman. And then we're going to bring it on home with that final page. Fariha.
So in the kindly one is like three women who are different, like they're typically women, but it's a three being, and one is like the old version, one is the middle, the mother, so one is the crone, the mother, and the one that is like she's more attractive version, so it's like they're supposed to provide three different feelings out of whoever's noticing, and the three of them can actually change the shapes among themselves. So it's like the idea that you can be, I looked at it as like, there's a kind in different way. Like Kurt is kind in different, like you said, like the woman is saying that she's literally kind. The Xavier is probably saying like he were always the heart of the X-Men, and then the last character is saying it probably in a different way. That's how I kind of looked at it. But yeah, sorry.
Well, and the interesting thing from Myth is that they're not actually kind. They're called the kindly ones as a euphemism because they are the ones who are snipping the strings of your life in the same way, that you might, call God like our Heavenly Father when he's the cruel Old Testament God. But the kindly ones, specifically, as Fariha pointed out, come in a 3. And there's another religion that has a 3, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So we've got a father here, Charles Xavier, who's been looking at his pictures of his children earlier. He's one of the ones who's calling Kurt the kindly ones. We've also got a son, because this issue ends with the reveal that perhaps the Patchwork Man all along has been a representation of somebody whose mentality is often a patchwork of many different thought patterns and powers, which is Xavier's son, David Haller, aka Legion. But of course, that leaves us too with who is the Holy Ghost. Possibly our dear dead Blindfold, the first character within the story to ever bring up Blindfold, and by extension, Destiny, still being cold dead and in the ground, is Nightcrawler. And that is the context in which Legion calls Nightcrawler a kindly one. Tyler, what did you think about the return of Legion?
Given all the whole Reign of X promo, I kind of knew that he's coming back. And Seasborough basically wrote a Legion story, run in X-Men before. Yeah. So it's not surprising to me that he came back here. What was surprising to me was that, which was kind of spoiled by Fariha in our chat, is that Legion seems to know what is happening with Moira.
Yeah.
Yes!
In a very indirect way. He's like, well, have you?
And you know how he knows? Because Age of X, he sucked Moira in. It's
everybody
Moira.
just thought it was a personality, but it was actually Moira.
It's actually Moira. It's
which is why we need Mike Carey to write the Moira book.
Okay, so go read Age of X. Go read Age of X after reading Hawks 2. You will see that was Moira's experiment with why, if there was no X-Men, because she is running out of lives and she needs to do it. Moira is very upset after decimation, after everything that happened, after Wanda's nonsense, and she is super depressed. Read every one of Moira's line after reading Hawks 2. You would never think that's an imagination. That's not one of the personality. It cannot be. That's how he knows what happened. Like, he knows what Moira is, and he's asking the question that I also asked. What if someone asked the question, hey, what about all those
what about the precon?
And he's here. And then Blindfold was also his girlfriend in Cy Spurrier's run. So there is a reason why he's asking about Blindfold.
Yeah.
It's all coming together.
And there were like a couple of lines. I mean, apart from that, right? There were a couple of lines towards the end of this issue that really, really succinctly, it's so good in a way. For example, Kurt was being blunt with Xavier. The polite fiction of telepaths.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was so good.
That's how packed this issue is that I wasn't even going to throw that out for discussion, and yet it's one of the best Xavier conversations of all time.
Line. Yeah. And it's basically Kurt saying that, look, you have never shined from like coming into our mind and pick up any information you want without our permission. So why are you asking me now? Like, why are you
asking? Xavier responds with the same phrase that Nemesis uses, which is fictions, aka abstractions, have currency in our brave new world.
I love it. I just got
also one of the ones is the penny for your thought is like, why am I gonna give you a penny? You're gonna take it.
And you can take it. That's such a burn.
That was the biggest burn for me. That was like
No, that's why I'm saying like Xavier was picking him to vote with him on the Quiet Council. Not gonna happen. He's wrong on all counts.
But sorry.
No. Go ahead if you're still on the same point, because I was going to move to the second point.
Because the thing is, like, the X-Men legacy by Mike Carey, Xavier, is actually the one who would be proud of it, though. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that unless they brought him back in a different time after his X-Force death. But the thing is that I feel like there is a certain understanding that he has about what X-Men he started, what they have become, and then he has a certain pride about it. So I feel like to him, it's probably, maybe he actually put them in there to detract from him, to challenge him. At least that's how my look into that has always been. So.
All right, Tyler, final point.
The second line, the second part of the another line that I really, really liked, which we actually touched on very early on in this episode recording, is that it says that Kurt says that they cannot all be off-playing heroes and they cannot all be indispensable. And that is actually the reason why Krakoa needs structure. They need to give everyone a responsibility. Otherwise, they are going to be off doing things like that. They're going to be like worshipping people coming back from the dead. They're going to kill themselves off just to get the thrill of dying and being resurrected, especially when it is on a mission. And, you know, and all sorts of things that is happening here. So I thought that was like so well and so pointed written here, right?
I mean, we need school. We need that school. It's like, you know, but that's what I'm saying. Like everything that I'm scared about where Krakoa is circling down, every point has been made in this.
This book posits it's already down. We're already there. Like there are issues.
The other thing also is like, is Kurt living in that windowless, doorless tower?
I hope so.
I think so.
Well, another question, did Kurt die here on the final page?
No.
It seems an awful lot like Legion is disintegrating his body.
Him.
Yeah, he'll teleport him somewhere or something. He's not dead. Or maybe I'll be wrong next month. I'm just glad to see Legion again. I love X-Men Legacy. I was a little depressed boy in college reading about Legion, trying to get a hold of his stuff, and I was like, I can empathize with this to an extent.
Well,
so it's just cool to see him write him again.
The reason I'm asking if Kurt is dying is because are we going to get another one of those moments where he doesn't remember how he died and Legion's kind of almost making this confession to Kurt of like, you already know about why you get it. You know why Blindfold's not dead and all, but then he kills him and sends him back. Like, is Xavier backing him up to that second? So I think it really, really matters if Kurt is dying or not, because that's one of the themes of this whole issue about meaningless death. And also if you're the same person when you come back, if you've missed some part of your personal development that's been abandoned, which is something X-Force has been talking about in that moment that you died. So I'm very, very curious to know if Kurt dies here on the final page.
Knowing Legion,
I think he's okay.
Knowing Legion, he probably did kill him so that he can have this conversation again and again, and then just like torture them again and again. Like it's like, no, you don't know what's happening, and he knows. He's the only one who knows, other than Xavier. And to be honest, we have never seen where Moira's no place is. What if it's in his head? I don't know.
No. It's somewhere physical.
We have.
It's like underneath.
Where it's underneath in the sea.
It's like below. It's like
Krakoa.
the negative of Krakoa. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But the thing is, before we go, there's like other Krakoas growing up in other continents.
Well, it looks like it might be wherever Araco is heading.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's like other, like, you know, other, like, it's like continents and stuff like that. And last thing, Jamie Dupes, like just clapping at
that was fun. I love that. And the elephant guy. I like the elephant man.
They're like all clapping. Like, you know, I love the Jamie Dupes because they're just all over, just doing little things.
Doing little things here and there. Yeah.
Well, I think that really draws together I think a lot of people came into this thinking this was going to be the Nightcrawler religion book, and it's going to be to an extent. Clearly the data pages have framed it that way, but this is going to be kind of the every possible wrong thing about Krakoa, but also every possible structure of Krakoa, and how the wrong things are supported by the structure and how the structure supports the wrong things, and if there's any way to get out of that. I think in a way it is the most important X-Men book right now, and I'm so I would pay any amount of money to read issue 2 right now in whatever stage of production it is in currently. But that, my friends, is the end of our discussion of Way of X #1. What a discussion. I mean, when I tell you that I outlined so much stuff. My outline alone is 1,000 words. And yet these pictures we're transmitting to you said a lot more than those 1,000 words about this issue, which is part of the thrill of getting together to do this, because what does that allow us to remember every week, every issue, Fariha?
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's right. And if there has been any X-Men issue that, as great as it was for me by itself, I got so much more from other opinions, it's this one. I would invite you for a book like this to reach out and hear opinions. Your take on it
Read
alone
this book.
is just one thing. Please go to our colleagues at ComicsXF, check out what people are saying on Twitter, on every review site there is, take in all the perspectives and help it fuel your own perspective and broaden your insight on this book. So on behalf of myself, of Harry, Tyler, and Fariha, thank you so much for this, sticking with us in this mega-sized discussion of Way of X here on This Week in X. And we will be back here on Crushing Comics with more discussion of our X-Men comics. So please, until we see you and speak to you again, be well.
Bye.